She said it softly, almost like she regretted letting it slip. You're making me forget my age. The words stayed in the air, warm and trembling, like steam over her untouched tea. I didn't know what to say. Maybe because there wasn't an answer that wouldn't sound foolish. So I just looked at her, and that was already too much. It had been years since I'd seen her. Not as my professor, not in that too-bright classroom where her voice carried over pages of poetry, but as a woman sitting across from me in a half-empty cafe, sunlight cutting across her face through the blinds. Her hair was a little shorter now. There were faint lines at the corners of her mouth, the kind that come from too much thinking and too many polite smiles. She looked comfortable, at least until I noticed her fingers circling the rim of her cup again and again, as if tracing something she couldn't name. Still quiet as ever, she said, half smiling. I listen better than I talk, I managed. Her eyes flicked up to mine, sharp, amused. That's not how I remember you. That stung a little. I wasn't sure if she meant it kindly. The space between us felt too small for the kind of silence that followed. I could hear the hum of the espresso machine, the soft shuffle of a barista cleaning cups, and beneath it all, the faint rhythm of her breathing. She glanced at my hands. You still write? Trying to, I said. Mostly editing other people's words now. She nodded, her expression unreadable. It suits you, rearranging things until they almost say what you mean. That made me laugh quietly, though I wasn't sure she'd meant it as a joke. I wanted to tell her that I'd memorized half the poems she once taught, that sometimes I still thought in her cadence, that even now, I noticed the way she leaned forward when she wanted to sound certain. But none of that would have sounded right. Too much truth always felt like a mistake around her. She reached for the sugar, and our fingers brushed. Just that, a small, unplanned contact. Her hand froze. Mine didn't move. The brush lasted maybe a second, maybe less, but in that second something shifted, like the air had suddenly thickened. She withdrew her hand first. Her smile didn't return. I tried to say something light, something to rescue us both from that quiet, but her attention had already drifted to the window. You always looked at people too directly, she murmured. I didn't realize that was a flaw. It isn't, she said, still not looking at me. It's just disarming. The word hung there, disarming. She said it as if she hadn't meant to, as if she'd already said too much. The sunlight had shifted, falling now across her wrist. I watched her trace the condensation on her glass with one finger, slow, absent. There was something almost intimate in the way she avoided my eyes, like she was aware of the distance, and what would happen if either of us crossed it. Then she looked at me again. Really looked. And I saw it, the hesitation, the pull, the quiet surrender hiding behind her composure. You're making me forget my age, she said again, this time quieter, as if testing the truth of it. My throat tightened. I almost reached for her hand, almost. Before I could, the door opened behind me. A rush of cold air swept through, carrying laughter and the sound of someone calling her name. She blinked, the spell breaking, her lips parting as if to apologize. But she didn't. She just smiled that small, knowing smile, and looked away. We didn't plan to see each other again that soon. But 3 days later she called. Not a text, called. Said she had an extra ticket to a lecture downtown. Her voice was casual, but too even, like she'd practiced sounding that way. I thought you might enjoy it, she said. I would, I answered, almost before she finished. When I arrived, she was already there, standing by the door of the auditorium, coat draped over her arm, scarf slightly loose at her throat. For a moment I just watched her. It wasn't that she looked younger, she didn't. It was that she carried her age like it meant something, every glance measured, every movement deliberate. We took seats near the back. The lights dimmed. I could smell her perfume, faint, like cedar and something floral, the kind that doesn't demand attention but stays long after you've left. Halfway through the talk, she leaned closer to whisper something. Her breath brushed my ear. I didn't hear the words, only felt them. I nodded anyway. When the applause started, neither of us clapped. Outside, the evening was cool and damp. She hesitated under the streetlight, then smiled. Coffee again? Or something stronger? I said before thinking. She tilted her head, amused. Careful. There it was, the invisible line again. Always close enough to feel it, never close enough to cross. We found a quiet bar with low light and tired jazz playing through bad speakers. She ordered wine, I ordered the same. Do you ever see anyone? I asked before I could stop myself. She took a sip, not looking at me. See anyone? Like date? Her lips curved faintly. That sounds like a student question. I'm not your student anymore. That doesn't make it less complicated. There it was, the word I hadn't dared say aloud, complicated. She toyed with her glass, thumb gliding along the rim. I was married once, she said. A long time ago. He was kind, mostly. We just stopped being kind back. I didn't know what to do with that. I wanted to reach across the table, but I didn't. She filled the silence herself. You? Nothing serious, I said. No one that stayed. That sounds lonely. It is, I said. Then softer. Sometimes. Her eyes lifted to mine. Something in them shifted, understanding, maybe, or recognition. Later, when we stood outside again, the wind tugged at her scarf. She reached up to fix it, and I moved without thinking, catching the loose end for her. My fingers brushed her collarbone. She froze. So did I. The air between us felt thin, electric. She didn't move away, not right away. Finally, she whispered, You shouldn't look at me like that. I wanted to say I wasn't sure how else to. But the words stayed in my chest. Instead, I let the scarf slip from my hand slowly, like a promise I hadn't made yet. She didn't thank me. She didn't need to. Her eyes lingered a second too long, and then she smiled, just barely. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of afternoon that pretends to be ordinary. She'd asked me to stop by her office, said she had a manuscript I might want to look at. When I arrived, the hallway outside was quiet, most of the campus emptied for the weekend. Her door was half open, a slant of late light cutting across the floor. Come in, she said without looking up. She was reading at her desk, glasses low on her nose, hair pulled back. There was something disarming about how composed she looked, like nothing between us existed anywhere but in my head. You're early, she added, standing to pour 2 cups of coffee from a small press on the table. I didn't want to keep you waiting. She smiled faintly, handed me a cup. Our fingers brushed, again. Always accidental. Always too deliberate to be. I took the seat across from her, trying not to watch the way her sleeves slipped a little as she leaned forward. She began talking about the manuscript, tone calm, professional, but every time her eyes flicked up, it felt like the air shifted. Then her phone buzzed. A brief vibration, followed by a sharp exhale. She silenced it quickly, face unreadable. Colleague, she murmured. He tends to misunderstand things. The word misunderstand landed heavily between us. I nodded, pretending not to notice how her hand lingered on the phone a second longer than necessary. We tried to go back to the pages, but something had already changed. The silence pressed closer. The coffee went cold. At one point she reached for a folder beside me, leaning across the desk. Her perfume, that subtle cedar note, filled the space. I didn't move back. Neither did she. "Can I?" She started, voice low, but then the door creaked. We both froze. A knock followed by a cheerful voice. "Professor? You in there?" Her breath caught. She straightened, eyes wide. I slid my chair back, heart hammering. "Just a minute," she called out, forcing steadiness into her tone. She gathered a few papers, shuffled them as if we'd been discussing coursework. A student peeked in, tall, smiling, completely unaware. "Oh, sorry! Didn't realize you had someone. Just going over edits," she said quickly. The student nodded, mumbled something about next week's schedule, and left. The moment the door closed, she exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh, almost a tremor. "That was close," I said. "Too close," she murmured. Her hand went to her temple, brushing away a strand of hair. I stood, unsure what to do with my hands, my pulse still racing. She looked up at me, really looked, and for a second, we forgot to pretend. Her gaze dropped to my mouth, then back to my eyes. I felt it, that small, impossible pull between us, fragile and certain. "Don't," she whispered, though I hadn't moved. "I wasn't going to." "Yes," she said softly. "You were." Her voice cracked on the last word, and before either of us could step away, we were standing too close, close enough to feel each other's breath, close enough for silence to become dangerous. But she turned first. Always she turned first. "I should lock the door next time," she said. And yet she didn't move. It had been raining all evening, the kind that blurs everything, turns streets into mirrors. She texted me first this time. "Can you drop by? I can't get this draft right." I didn't hesitate. I should have. When she opened the door, she was barefoot, hair loose, sweater sleeves pushed up to her elbows. The soft lamplight behind her made the room feel smaller, quieter. The rain tapped against the window like it wanted in. "Sorry for the mess," she said, though it wasn't messy, only lived in. Books open, candles half burned, a single glass of wine on the table. "You've been working late," I said. She gave a small, tired laugh. "Working, avoiding, they start to look the same after a while." I stepped closer, pretending to look at the pages spread across the table. Her handwriting curved sharply, precise. But my eyes weren't on the words. They were on her, the faint shadow of tiredness beneath her eyes, the way her lips pressed together when she concentrated. "Let me see," I said, reaching for the paper. Our hands met instead. Neither of us moved. The air tightened, that same unspoken current we kept pretending not to feel. She didn't pull away this time. "Why do you keep coming here?" she asked suddenly, her voice low. I looked at her. "You keep asking me to." "That's not an answer." "Then what do you want me to say?" "That this isn't what I think it is." Her words trembled slightly, not quite command, not quite plea. I swallowed. "And what do you think it is?" She looked at me for a long time before answering. "Something we shouldn't feel this clearly." I stepped closer without meaning to. Close enough that the scent of rain and her perfume blurred together. Close enough to see the way her breath quickened. "Elena." Her name sounded different spoken like that, not formal, not safe. She lifted her eyes to mine. "You don't know what you're doing," she whispered. "I do." "Do you?" she said, and the corner of her mouth twitched, half defiance, half surrender. Her voice softened then. "You'll regret it." "I already do," I said. That broke something. Her hand came up, almost absently, brushing the wet from my hair. The gesture was tender, almost maternal, until her fingers lingered against my temple, then trailed down to my jaw. I caught her wrist gently, holding it there. "This isn't," she started, but the rest of the sentence disappeared as her breath caught. Neither of us looked away. The rain outside grew heavier, the sound filling every pause we didn't dare break. For a moment, there was nothing but the closeness, the soft tremor of her pulse beneath my thumb, her face tilted just slightly toward mine. Then, almost under her breath, she said, "If you touch me, everything changes." "I know," I whispered. And just as the distance vanished, just as I leaned in, the sound of her phone shattered the quiet. The phone kept ringing. She didn't move to answer it. When it finally stopped, the silence that followed was worse. Her hand slipped from my jaw. I let it. Something in her face shifted, not rejection exactly, but a retreat. "I should have known better," she said softly. I didn't understand. "Elena," she stepped back, rubbing her wrist where I'd held it. "You shouldn't be here." "Because of the call?" Her eyes flicked toward the phone. The screen still glowed faintly on the table, a name I didn't recognize. "Thomas." Her expression faltered when she realized I'd seen it. "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "Then what is it?" She exhaled, sharp, almost angry. "My ex-husband." The words landed heavy, real. "He's been calling more lately. I didn't plan to talk to him again, but—" She trailed off, staring at the floor. "He wants to meet. Says we should clear things. And will you?" "I don't know." The way she said it, not dismissive, but torn, sent something sour twisting through my chest. I tried to hide it, but she caught it anyway. "Don't," she murmured. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you have a right to be hurt." I didn't answer. I couldn't. For a while, neither of us moved. The rain outside softened to a whisper, and the room seemed to shrink again, as if everything, the light, the air, even the smell of wet clothes, wanted to force us closer. Finally, she said, "You think this is just about age?" "It isn't." "Then what is it?" "It's about what people see. What they'll assume." She laughed under her breath, bitterly. "I've built a life on being careful. You're the first mistake I've wanted to make." The words hit deeper than I expected. "Then make it," I said quietly. Her eyes flashed, not with anger, but something more fragile. "You don't understand what that costs me." She turned away, pacing toward the window. The reflection of the city lights moved across her face like something ghostly. I followed, not too close. "Tell me, then. Tell me what it costs." She faced me again, finally, fully. "My job. My reputation. Every quiet corner I've made safe for myself. And you still asked me here?" Her lips parted as if to deny it, but she didn't. For a heartbeat, she looked unguarded, like she'd stepped out from behind all her practiced restraint. Her hands trembled as she reached for the curtain, closing it against the light. The room went dim. She turned back toward me, close enough that I could feel her breath when she said, "I shouldn't want this." Then stop. Her eyes didn't move from mine. "I can't." Something in the air broke, the last thread of pretense snapping between us. She took a step forward. I didn't move back. Her voice was barely a whisper now, but steady. "Then I need you to understand, after tonight we can't go back." The rain had stopped, but the sound of it still lived in the walls. The quiet between us felt different now, no longer hesitation, but something heavier, waiting to fall. She stood near the window, the curtain drawn halfway, light spilling through in fractured gold. Her breath fogged the glass. I could see her reflection, still, thoughtful, torn. "You should go," she said finally. "Do you want me to?" Her eyes closed. That's not the same question. I took a step closer. Then another. The air between us shifted again, that invisible thread drawing tighter. Elena. She turned. The lamplight caught in her hair. I saw her hand tremble before she steadied it against the sill. You don't understand what happens if I stop pretending this doesn't matter. I think I do, I said, voice low. You'll move on, she whispered. You'll forget. And I'll still be the woman who should have known better. I shook my head. You think this is something I can just unfeel? For a heartbeat she almost smiled, a tired, beautiful, dangerous almost. You make everything sound simpler than it is. Because you make it sound impossible. She exhaled sharply, almost a laugh, almost a sob. It is impossible. I reached out before I could think better of it, brushing a strand of hair from her face. My hand lingered near her temple, the warmth of her skin just beneath my fingertips. She didn't move. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You shouldn't. I know. But neither of us stepped away. The room seemed to fade. Only the rhythm of our breathing, the faint hum of city lights outside. She looked up at me then, and in that look was everything we hadn't said, the weeks of silence, the restraint, the guilt, the wanting. Elena, I started. Don't, she murmured. If you say my name like that again, I'll forget how old I am. Her confession landed soft but deep, and for a second, everything tilted. She took a slow breath, her hand rising, hesitating, before resting lightly against my chest. I felt her pulse through it, quick, uncertain. Tell me this isn't real, I said. I can't, she breathed. The space between us vanished. Our foreheads touched, not quite a kiss, but closer than denial could survive. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but instead, she whispered, If we do this, it changes everything. Maybe that's the point. She let out a small, trembling laugh, half disbelief, half surrender. We stood there, suspended, her fingers curled slightly in my shirt, my hand still resting against her cheek. No one moved first. No one had to. The choice wasn't in the kiss we almost shared, but in the silence that followed, the shared knowing that whatever happened next would be real. When she finally stepped back, her eyes were wet, her voice steady. Now you understand. I nodded. I do. And for the first time, she didn't look away. Morning found us both quieter. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed and still. Light spilled through the window in long, soft ribbons, catching on the edges of the books, the half-finished glass of wine, the coat I never put back on. Elena stood by the counter, pouring coffee like nothing had changed, except everything had. She wasn't avoiding my gaze this time. She handed me a cup and said, almost lightly, You should have gone hours ago. I know. You didn't. No, I said. I didn't. She smiled then, a small, tired curve of her lips that reached her eyes for the first time in weeks. You're too stubborn for your own good. Probably, I said, taking the cup from her hand. Our fingers brushed, and this time, either of us pulled away. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, the kind that only happens when words have already done their work. I kept thinking it would ruin everything, she said after a moment. That if I let you get too close, I'd lose myself. Or you would. I looked at her, really looked. The lines on her face weren't marks of age anymore, they were stories. Time, laughter, ache, all of it, somehow beautiful. Maybe we don't have to lose anything, I said quietly. Maybe we just change. She set her cup down, stepped closer. You make it sound so simple again. Maybe it is. Maybe it doesn't have to be perfect to be real. Her hand came up then, resting gently against my cheek. You know people will talk, she whispered. Let them. She laughed softly, shaking her head, and then, finally, she leaned in, forehead against mine. The touch was small, almost nothing, but it carried everything that had been waiting between us. No words. No sudden declarations. Just breaths shared, eyes closed, two people no longer pretending not to want what they already had. When she finally spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. You're still making me forget my age. I smiled, eyes still closed. Good. Maybe I'm starting to forget mine too. We stayed like that, her hand against my face, my arm around her waist, the room soft with morning light and the faint hum of rainwater dripping from the roof. Outside, the city began to stir, but inside, the quiet felt like a promise, not of forever, but of now. And for both of us, that was enough. When she finally stepped back, she didn't look away. Coffee's getting cold, she said. Then pour another, I answered. And she did, smiling this time, without hesitation. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?